Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the So We Speak podcast. This is Cole Fakes, and I'm joined by Terry Fakes. We're coming to you this Thanksgiving week, all ready for the holidays. And, the funny thing is, the holidays are supposed to be a time that you slow down and enjoy time off and all that. That never seems to happen until you get right up to Christmas. It seems like everything in advance of Christmas is just faster and faster and faster.
I think that's really true. And it seems to me, maybe this is a statement about my age, but it seems like it's speeding up and that we're cramming even more into that time period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then, as many people have observed this year, Thanksgiving is so late that it compresses the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, yes, I'm sure your schedule is just as busy as ours.
Well, before we get into the full Christmas season, we don't want to skip over Thanksgiving and the gratitude that we have. And I always like to take this opportunity for So We Speak to thank all of our supporters, those who have supported financially, those who have supported in prayer, those who read, share, comment. The part of the joy of doing this is getting to engage with all the people that read and listen and want to send thoughts back. I've gotten great feedback, great book recommendations, just great thoughts from a lot of people. You can always email us at info@sowespeak.com, and I always look forward to reading those. We make about one plea a year. God has been totally faithful to fulfill the needs we have for this ministry. We ask for money one time a year. I'd love to just keep it that way, instead of doing like a big telethon or something like that, as fun
Mhm.
as that would be. Just to remember us at the end of the year, as you're looking at your end of year giving and you want to support our ministry, about a third of our support comes in at the end of the year. Like most nonprofits, most ministries, that's the case. And we are so grateful when people support the ministry. So it really is. It's about a third end of the year, a third monthly, and then a third just special gifts that people make to the
Mhm.
ministry to support what we're doing. It's been a huge year. Really looking forward to next year. We've got some projects planned that we aren't quite ready to talk about yet, but just some great content. And looking back on this year, I'm so grateful for the generosity of 2023 to power us to do ministry and reach literally tens of thousands of people that we hadn't reached before in this year. So thanks to everybody. And if you are looking to give towards the end of the year, we'd be so grateful for your continued support of So We Speak.
One of the things that you architected this year was a bigger push into other platforms, electronic platforms like YouTube, and that it costs some money, but for the return, it was a really good investment. And like you said, we're able to reach a lot more people in the medium that they are used to consuming and get the message out to far, far more people. So fortunately, because of donors, we were able to make that move. And I know you have more things planned for next year.
That's right. Well, a lot of our investment is in really talented people. We've
Hmm.
got two great people working with our social media team. We've got great editors. And so, Sarah and Carol Ann on the social media side, and Kaylee and Brittany on the editing side. We just have an awesome, awesome team. And that's not even to mention our writers, people that we interview. It's a great kingdom work to have all these people pulling in the same direction. So very grateful, very thankful. God has been very generous to us, and we know He'll continue to do that. So I wanted to just chat with you a little bit about something that you've been passionate about for a long time, and that is the season of Advent. Uh, if I didn't know any better, I would think you created the season of Advent because in our church tradition, nobody does it. But
Right.
we've always done it as a family, and it's been some of our best memories. In fact, we just released actually late in the Advent season last year. This is the full Advent season for it this year. Is our So We Speak Advent book that has the material that you guys pioneered for the groups, but now it also has songs. It has ways to do activities. It has ways to facilitate meeting of several families on Sunday night or a Wednesday night to celebrate Advent together. It really is kind of your one-stop booklet for celebrating Advent. So tell me a little bit about how you got started thinking about Advent and how you developed this ritual, this rhythm of doing Advent together with families.
That's a great question. Well, as most of our listeners know, I didn't grow up Christian. I became a Christian in Church of Christ, don't celebrate Advent. And then when after Laura and I were married, she had been at Westminster Presbyterian, and they do. Advent is part of the tradition of the Presbyterian Church. And I remember it was well into my adulthood before I even heard the word. And I remember asking, what is Advent? And I realized, having read the Bible, it's not a biblical idea. It's not like a command, but it's a tradition. And I'm sure we'll talk in a moment. When you look at the history, it's actually a collection of traditions. But we started doing it for the simple reason that as our kids were little, we wanted to push back against the commercialization. We wanted us, but also particularly our kids, you guys, to grow up knowing there's more to Christmas than TV commercials and presents under the tree and that sort of thing, that there's a real meaning behind why we do it. So we just started doing this, ad-libbing it with some friends from other churches. And we'd get together on the 4 Sundays before Advent. We would have dinner together. Then we would do a little, sing some songs, say prayer, talk about scripture. We literally ad-libbed it. And when you have little kids, a lot of ad-libbing is necessary. Well, out of that, your mom and I, primarily your mom, started to organize that into just a simple little booklet that made it really easy for people with little kids to get together to just read this verse, light this candle, say this prayer, and sing these songs together so that people didn't have to ad lib. So that's how it originally came about. And then when I became a pastor at Crossings, I realized that Crossings, Church of God of Anderson, it's not their tradition to do Advent. But it seemed to me by that time it was such a useful tradition that it would be really good for people. Again, this isn't a command, it's not something you have to do, but it's an extremely useful tradition. So we began pushing it in our Sunday school classes, and today it's very widely practiced.
Well, it's a great tradition. I think in a lot of ways, it's a tradition very similar to family worship in the sense that there is a long history in the church of people doing this. There are certain
Mm-hmm.
denominations that still do it, but on the whole, most people don't. And the reason to do it is not, a legalistic, hey, you need to do this to be a better Christian. The reason you do it is because it is so rewarding and it is so rich to make time for those spiritual moments, especially in the lead up to Christmas. I think, for our family and for the church more generally, it's a great reminder of the real purpose of the Christmas season. Whether you think about the angle of Christmas as a commercialized holiday where, the message of Christmas is to spend and then to get presents and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, to be bombarded the moment Thanksgiving ends with Black Friday. Now Black Friday extends back like into October. It's like a year
Right.
round Black Friday season. But whether it's that aspect of it or it's just the rush to get everything done and get travel plans and all of that, that by the time you get to where you're going, you can barely even enjoy it because you've been so frantically busy leading up to it, or anything else, everything that comes with the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Resisting that, stepping back out of that and remembering, why do we even celebrate this season? It's more than just a day off. It's more than just a time to travel. What are we really focused on here? Advent makes sure that you do that.
After we started doing it, you make a good point. After we started doing it, I thought we were doing it for the kids, right? Which is a good motive. But then I realized that to stop once a week for the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, and you mentioned before how busy that is, how much stress there is. Will I get this present bought? Will I get this done? These people are coming over. Are we ready? I mean, there's just so much stress leading up to Christmas. I realized that it reset my frame of mind. I mean, as we're going through the Advent and remembering what this is about, it hit me that I will not remember, and the world certainly will not long remember anything that happened during that whole Christmas season of fill in the year, whatever year it is. But I will remember, and it has eternal consequences that Jesus Christ was born. And it actually helped me reset a little and just put my busyness into perspective a little bit.
Yeah, it is kind of a resistance movement. It is something where
Uh
you
huh.
pull yourself out of the out of the rat race, out of the stream, and you realize for a moment that there's something so powerful and special here to anticipate. And that's the way it started. The Advent is interesting in that no one knows exactly when this
Hmm.
became a prominent tradition. And there's stories about certain times that it arose, and but really, as best I can find, nobody knows exactly who said, well, let's celebrate Advent. I mean, the
Right.
lead up to it is in scripture if you think about it, but it's through the pregnancy of Mary and Elizabeth. That's the lead
Right.
up, the announcement of the children that are coming and the anticipation of their birth. But after that, really, at some point the church started to orient its life, which is called the church calendar, the church year, around this season. In fact, it was
Hmm.
surprising to me to find out years ago that the church calendar starts in Advent. It doesn't start at New Year's like we do. It
Right.
starts in Advent, anticipating the coming of Christ. And the way that the church calendar is oriented is through these seasons of longing and fulfillment. If you think about Advent leading up to Christmas, and then Lent leading up to Easter, and you have your ordinary time that runs after
Hmm.
Epiphany. Um, you know, it's it's one of those rhythms that's actually meant to shape the way you live your whole life. And there's
Right.
an element of this that's kind of odd, like why are we I always do this on Good Friday. Why are we pretending, like we don't know what happens on Easter Sunday? It's like you do
Right.
these services on Good Friday and you're really trying to get into the part, of the people who are mourning Jesus, but Jesus is risen every day. The resurrection is forever. That's not what it's about. What it's about is conforming our lives back to this pattern of hope and joy and love and peace that we celebrate in Advent, or the longing of Christ's passion and resurrection in the Easter season. And in that way, it models the Jewish feasts of the Old
Hmm.
Testament. So, in Leviticus, you get 7 feasts. Now the Jews celebrate 2 more, one in Purim, which just happens
Hmm.
later in the Bible. If you think about the story of Esther, that's where we get the Feast of Purim, and then
Right.
Hanukkah, which is the best known today, but that's based on a miracle that happens in between the two testaments. That happens in the
Hmm.
mid second century BC, during the Maccabean period. So you get this rhythm of feast days, fast days, celebration days, and that was something that was carried over from the Jews into the early church, partly because the early church was still celebrating some of these feasts.
Right.
But then they start to take on a life of their own through these new events in the life of Christ and in the life of the church. And so what's another interesting thing about Advent is it actually historically is a fast. We think about it as a
Right.
celebration, anticipation, it's exciting, it's a buildup, but in church history it's actually a fast. In fact, the way they used to celebrate this in the year 567, they mandated that all monks fast every day of December leading up to Christmas. And I'm glad we don't do that anymore. But I do
Right.
think the penitence of it, the fasting of it, is an important thing to remember.
I agree. And by the way, just because somebody's sitting out there thinking they fasted every day through December, how did they live? Well, fasting every day would have meant you didn't eat during daylight hours. So they ate probably far less, but you didn't eat anything during the day. So you could do that for a whole month, and they did. And it was a way of reordering your life. And there is something to be said about fasting, whether you do it that way or the way we do it today, perhaps going 24 hours without eating. The whole point of a fast, Cole, as you know, is to reorder your life. It will get your attention when you don't eat. Uh, and it makes you think about why am I doing what I'm doing? And obviously, fasting before Jesus comes reorients your daily life and disrupts your routine and makes you step back and think, wait a minute, something big is about to happen. So I know that we like the feasting better than the fasting, but fasting has its purpose, and that is how it started, was as a fast to disrupt your routine and get your focus on what's coming.
So, having done this now for a lot of years and having written a booklet on it, give us your tips on how to do Advent and maybe even some pro tips. Little bitty kids, no kids, depending on your group. How would you advise that people get together to celebrate Advent?
That's a great question. I have found that eating a meal together it really makes it meaningful. And if you can't, we've done it before where we just did dessert, but some kind of sharing before you do the Advent is really nice to do. I think having an order that helps you do it is just going to save you a ton of effort. We wrote two little booklets that you can still get through Crossings Church for a donation, and they're very minimalist. But one is for when you have kids, and the other is when you have adults or older kids, and it's a group. And obviously, those are more designed for discussion questions to read the passage, talk about the theme of joy, hope, peace, or love, and have more adult conversation about it. But I would recommend that. Now, in the So We Speak book, you have incorporated both of those so that you can choose which one you want to use. And it's a little more comprehensive. But honestly, having a guide means no one really has to do any serious preparation. You simply go through it. You will read a verse. You'll light a candle or two or three or four on a little Advent wreath, and those can be purchased anywhere, very inexpensive because light is an important part of this because of Jesus. I am the light of the world. And so lighting candle, and believe me, when you have little kids, lighting candles is the highlight of Advent. And so we would
Hmm.
choose each week for each candle, some child, would go around, maybe from the oldest to the youngest, to light the candles. So you can really involve them a little bit. When they get older, they could read a verse, but some of the verses are so simple that they'll memorize them. They could say the verse. But the activities for kids are certainly appropriate for kids. But I would recommend having a guide to go through it. And it doesn't have to take long. If you have little kids, 3, 4 year olds, 5 year olds, this can be a 15 or 20-minute process. Of course, when your kids are older and you're having discussion, it could be 30, 40 minutes, an hour, if you wish, whatever time you wanted. But Cole, one of the side effects of doing this is the memories that are produced. Some of the memories are really sweet and touching when you start to realize, oh my goodness, my kids are getting this, and they just see the purity of their hearts. And some of the memories are pretty humorous. And I'm sure you probably have both in your mind from your time growing up in various Advent celebrations.
Well, that's true. And having done these as a little kid, whether it's playing charades or Pictionary or whatever you end up playing together, you get some very funny memories. And it builds on itself too, because you'll remember what happened, in years past and things that have been said. But then too, you grow up with it too. You move from the candle being the most important part to getting to read, is a big
Hmm.
part for certain age groups in the kids to get to play the games, to finally, hopefully, some meaningful discussion around the lesson itself and around these topics. And so, yeah, we have a lot of hilarious memories, but also a lot of really great spiritual, powerful memories, praying for each other, prayer requests, answered prayer that's happened in these
Hmm.
groups, and just forged some lifelong friendships from people you meet with to do these groups. One of the things I really like, and I love that we incorporated into this So We Speak booklet, is singing. And it takes a little
Yes.
bit at first. Sometimes you have a group that's really great at singing, and sometimes you don't. You usually need somebody to start the group singing, but then everybody will
Right.
join in. And as we were talking about this before getting ready for this episode, one of the things that struck me is what's true about several Christmas hymns, but essentially "Joy to the World," which is a Christmas hymn about the first coming, but it's also based on scriptures looking towards the second coming of Christ. And
Hmm.
so Advent now, since we're not really anticipating Jesus' birth for the first time, we know that that's
Right.
actually happened, is kind of a multifaceted celebration.
It really is. And that's a great point you bring up because Advent was and is a way of marking the coming, the advent of right now, the advent of our celebration of the birth of Christ, the greatest, the birth of the greatest person in history. I would reserve the greatest event in history for Easter, the resurrection, but this is an important event. But for us now, we look back in some ways. We're remembering his birth, But maybe even more importantly, and this is something I honestly didn't think about for many years, is we are now looking forward. We live in a time of Advent for the second coming of Christ. And
Mhm.
I think that's an important thing to think of. It's a good reminder to me is we're not just living as though once upon a time in a far, far land, Jesus will come again. He has been here once, he will come again. And this idea of Advent is something that can live with us on a regular basis.
That's very true. We are in a longer Advent season now, waiting for his return. And so I hope that this piques your interest if you've never done Advent before, or spurs you on if you've done it before to get a group together, get your family together, celebrate Advent, get a booklet, sing some songs, read the scriptures, and just pause, just carve out some time to prepare your heart for Christmas. And I know that by doing that, because we've done it many times, Christmas will mean all the more because of it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Cole. Of all the gifts that you will get your children through the years, there may be a few that they will remember, but the enduring tradition of doing this together as a family is a gift you give to your children that they really will remember.